Okay,
All right,
let's.
let's do
Hooray,
it.
we made it.
Oh my
All right,
gosh.
guys, it's episode 15, second try,
Episode what? I mean,
right? Isn't it 15?
hopefully I'll put some because there's some bloopers that I definitely want to include from
Yeah.
uh the first the first attempt at recording this episode, which totally went down without a hitch. But after I listened back, I said that episode's just not up to the quality because you can't hear anything that anyone's saying.
Yeah. There's something about a podcast with no audio.
Yeah, yeah, that's an important bit where you're like, okay, that seems to be a problem. And like, yeah, I was
Mhm.
looking at the waveform, and because at first I was like, oh no, this is chill. I can do this, I can do that, and then as like the more I got into it, I was like, no, like it's not you. I would what I just had selectively chosen to listen into was just maybe approaching okay, but the normal
Yeah.
audio where you're just like talking like a normal person, you're just like, yeah, so this is that, and it was just like, no, there's nothing there. And then I literally do anything like go, yeah. It would just be
It's
so
just like
loud.
blowout.
Yeah, it'd be so loud. It's so funny. It was too much.
I don't
Could
know.
not.
I wonder if there's something with my mic that, or maybe I talk quiet. Do I?
No, like I said when we was looking at the audio this time, what had happened is, um, I just adjusted the wrong thing. When you talked, I went,
Yeah.
"Oh, Sean's loud. Let me turn him down." Instead of turning you down in my headphones, which is the right thing to do, turn down my personal audio because Sean's loud. I was like, let me lower Sean's voice. And then
Yep. Perfect.
there it goes. There he went, right? He's banished to the vocal shadow realm. It was too much, man. It was too
Okay.
much.
So the important stuff was one, we talked about the Relicblade Kickstarter.
We did, because the last time we also on episode 14 we talked about
Uh,
Relic Blade
I
Kickstarter, but
announced that I
now,
was going to do it, and we
yeah,
talked about how I was hoping to have the Kickstarter up and have already done it back in November. But as the keen listener will know, it is no longer November even
yeah,
now.
yeah.
Um, so it is December, and I there were a couple of things that ended up delaying the work. Chief among them is that my wife broke her foot,
Well, yeah, gosh.
and I just ended up really focusing on taking care of my family, making sure everything was taken care of there, and uh, and then also just you know making stuff takes a lot of time. Little delays on this or that add up, and we ended up not having painted samples ready to photograph because the figures I hadn't made them all.
That was
And I mean, I love to have a Kickstarter that's like basically done before I go so that like none of the work is hypothetical.
yeah.
I'd rather have it all be like done. And so I've continued through November and now, and even today, I'm working on that stuff um, to basically pushing the same schedule as if I had already had a successful Kickstarter. Like, figures are ordered, like I ordered the first run of the new miniatures. Production molds are made, and I'm having the fellas cast up inventory to fulfill the Kickstarter already.
Well, okay, nice.
Under the assumption, because I mean it's different with something totally new for Relic Blade. Even if the Kickstarter failed, um, I might not be able to publish the book I wanted to do, but I should be able to release the new figures and cover my costs
In the
because
new
people will
faction, yeah.
want new Relic Blade. But the Kickstarter definitely makes it so that I don't disappoint people. But I can meet all of the pre-order numbers, and I can use that money to do some fun stuff with packaging, which is the other thing I talked about was how the
Yeah.
Kickstarter is two faction sets and a rule book and tokens and cards for Cursebreaker. And it occurred to me that like it'll be way more fun to put that in a box set.
Mm-hmm.
I love a good 2-player box set, and a 2-player Cursebreaker box set that has, 2 magicians and their champions, but also the rules for using those characters in Relicblade. And then in the future, I can make them available as standalone faction sets. But through the Kickstarter, making a cool 2-player set to release is going to be really fun. So that's the other thing, is I want to shift it so that the main Kickstarter pledge is this 2-player box set for Cursebreaker, uh, and then also on a update for how the project is going. I have some playtesters on Cursebreaker, and
Big thanks, sir.
I've played a lot of games of Cursebreaker, so I'm not really super worried about whether it works or whether it's fun, because I really like it. Not every game's to everyone's taste, but I think it's a really, really unique, fun experience. But the big thing is making sure people can learn it,
Yeah.
making sure the rule book is laid out in such a way that people can read through it, enjoy reading it, feel like they understand all the information, and then have like a smooth, fun play experience, rather than feeling like the puzzle of is just figuring out what the heck how the game is
How
supposed
the
to be
game is.
played.
Yeah, what's
Because
the intent or what's the interpretation?
yeah, I mean, if you are into indie games like me, then you've definitely had that experience where half of the experience is just trying to understand how the game's even played. And so I'm trying to avoid that. And one thing I did is add a ton more examples, illustrated examples. So like each phase, I'll have like a little illustrated thing of being like, look, this magician casts these 2 spells that I just explained to you, and this is exactly what happens when that happens. Um, and that stuff I think really helps. And it's fun because uh, Relic Blade being like a artwork that I'm creating, like all of those little illustrations and rules things are part of the charm and what makes my work
Mm-hmm.
unique.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, just investing a little more time in in those things and trying to polish all that to be
That's
ready for a Kickstarter that I hope to launch in January. This time of year is really busy. I'm just hoping that people can save, a check that their grandma sent and get the 2-player box set for Cursebreaker
save them pennies.
and Relic Blade. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So the plan is not to go crazy with like stretch goals or other things. I'm hoping for it to be around $100 core pledge to get like a 2-player set. It might be more expensive just because everything costs so much more than it used to.
yeah,
I mean, 2-player box sets from
yeah,
Games Workshop are over $300 now,
yeah.
and I know inside knowledge they're making it as cheap as they can. The insider scoop is that they're trying to make a product as affordable as possible. So,
And I
uh,
experienced that with Demonship, when we were
uh,
pricing out the components, trying to figure out. And curiously enough, Demonship, because of that design and its requirements, was a lot more affordable in that regard. And then
yeah,
with Pit Lord, I'm like, all of a sudden, I'm like, I want all this, all these extra
yeah,
stuff. And then it's just like, oh, okay. Like, where do you really are, every little decision that you make it has long,
implications.
yeah,
Yeah.
different, a chain reaction sort of
And even
implications.
even if it's like a small addition, like say you have a miniature and you want their pose to be a little more dynamic, so you make it a 2-part miniature.
Mm-hmm.
It does, sure, the distribution it takes up on the mold, it may cost 10 cents more per unit, but then the labor of picking up 2 pieces of metal and putting it in a baggie with a base instead of 1 piece
Yeah.
is like twice as much. Well, I guess the labor of picking up a baggie, opening it is part 1, picking up a base is part 2, picking up the body is part 3, and picking up the arm is part 4. So it's like 25% more work, but still, like, that adds up so much over doing it thousands of times. And
Does,
so
yeah.
there's all these little things where you're like, oh, it's no big deal. We'll add one more card, and you're like, oh my gosh, what have I done?
Yeah, I
So
feel it. And it's curious to think back to that, because like as you're doing that, you become acutely aware of those kind of like unique details that
Yeah.
what you're doing like has that all of this every little doing it, you know, if you put the arm in and you didn't put the base in second, that like it would mess up. There's like a good
Oh
flow
yeah.
of like which piece goes in with, you know, first after this, and because of that, and you don't you pack like the first 10 to 20 first, being like, well, and then suddenly you're kind of like flowing with
Yeah.
something that works. But yeah, it's all that interesting stuff, and just like the decision to add cards, add other components, that sort of
Yeah.
thing. So
It's
what
a
kind
lot of
of,
moving parts.
speaking
And
of the
also, since
components,
we love our audience so much, and I want it to make it as accessible as possible, right?
yeah.
And so, like, I make paper miniatures for Relic Blade that give a fully beautiful like Relic Blade experience,
Hmm.
um, and are it's like $2,
Yeah. Yep. two
which is
dollars
funny because
plus the
like
time to
why
put them out.
charge at all? But like, I also I put
I was
I
gonna say,
put probably 100 hours or more,
why
200,
charge it
300
all
hours into making
for
it.
your
Yeah.
sweet drawings, man?
Yeah.
I know
I just
it's
want to make sure it's sort of like a little tip jar of a nod of respect that it's like, I know you worked hard for this and I respect that. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm
So,
with it. And I think speaking of components,
mhm, mhm.
what kind of things are you thinking of including in a like what does the all in pledge kind of look like for Cursebreaker
Oh
at this
yeah,
point?
so it should be a box of the same sort of size and shape as the Storms of Corral box.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
So 6 inches by 9 inches. And then it will have a soft cover 6 by 9 rule book for Cursebreaker, and that's about 100 pages book. So
Kind of like the new Seeker's Handbook.
yeah, I think I'll use the same probably printing
Yeah,
company as this.
that's
They're
great.
US based, and I can trust that the labor laws are a little bit more respectful in the US. I mean nothing's perfect, but I'm trying. And the Seeker's Handbook is 141 pages, so it'll be like this thick, you know,
Okay.
pretty good. Like
Yeah.
it'll be nice. And then a deck of cards. So as a two-player set, it'll have the spell books, which are important reference gameplay
Yeah, very
for it.
important.
Yeah. The spell books for, but I'll have two of each, so 16 spell books, and then I'll probably, I mean, I'd really like to. It could be a stretch goal, honestly, to include cards of all the different treasures that you can get, because I think the way the treasures work, for the most part, it's relatively straightforward. Like you could record it on a roster sheet,
Yeah.
but I also really like the illustration. So if you're gonna find the severed head of a necromancer that's still alive, but just a severed head, and it can summon zombies, like it would be fun to have a drawing of a severed necromancer head that
Yeah.
you keep on your belt, right?
For sure. Yeah,
So
there's
I don't know. There's part of that where it's like it's a lot more components and it doesn't really matter that much. But at the same time, you could then you'll have your spell books laid out and then your little necromancer head, and you'll remember that you have access to that spell.
yeah. In
So
it coming from like cuz it uses its new rules. It's not Relic
mhm,
Blade, but it is still in essentially kind of like a Relic Blade game, and there's a lot of that kind of crossover. And what is unique about it is that if you listener are familiar with Relic Blade, you do kind of and you play with cards. There's like an element of like a dashboard. You sort of set up a dashboard of
mhm,
how you like to lay out your characters and your upgrades. And Cursebreaker sort of has that with the spell books, but when
yeah,
since we were playing with the campaign sheets and writing a lot of it down, yeah, it didn't have that same element of like equipping and stuff. But
yeah,
in us
yeah.
talking
But
about it,
really, for the
that's
gear, but the spell book cards are very important. Like
oh
because
yeah,
you
oh
roll
yeah,
your dice,
yeah, super
you roll your
important.
dice, and each die face represents a different spell. And so you line them up next to the card, so you know that a 4 of nature is for summoning a wild animal,
Yeah, it
and the
really feels
3 is
like
for adapting to a different.
you're holding some books. You're like holding your
Yep.
books, and you're like,
Yep.
oh, look at
Oh,
this
I
book.
actually lied. A 4 in nature is not summoning a beast. It's a different one. I think it. What is the 4? It's a utility spell.
I was gonna
The
say,
5 is for
yeah, I
summoning a
was gonna say the
creature.
5 is the creature one. And I know
Anyways,
3, we changed 3 at some point.
yeah, 3 is adapt. 3 is a
Yeah,
powerful spell that lets you like change the die face of another one of your spells, which is like, dude,
which is crucial in that
really,
game. Yeah,
really good. Yeah,
yeah, it's
so
super interesting.
yeah, so cards and then tokens. I want to have similar
Right? Yeah, yeah,
to
yeah.
the token sheet that's in Storms of Corral.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Maybe not a measuring gauge, but instead
Yeah,
having 4 inch by 1 inch firewall
yeah, the
templates.
wall templates.
Yeah, because those come up as you're casting Wall of Flames
Yeah,
or
it's
the
a big
Great Wave.
part.
And then I have then tokens for days and bind and yeah, all of the
And term.
tokens.
Yeah,
Term.
good old term tokes.
All right, so tokens, cards, a book, and that'll be the Cursebreaker stuff. And then the figures will be the 8 figures,
Mm-hmm.
which is the Severed Hand characters, the pirates, and the Lotus Guild characters, the elves. And Cursebreaker uses basically the whole Relicblade range of miniatures.
Yeah.
So it won't be every miniature you need, but it'll be the player miniatures, and then the monsters you'll have to adapt based on your collection. And even it says in the rules, like, reskin the monsters so that you can play. I would love for you to use Relic Blade figures, but you can use some Reaper bones or some old Warhammer skeletons or whatever
Yeah, it's a game
for the
about
monsters.
magicians.
Mhm.
Magicians doing magic.
Oh, and then the last component would be the Relic Blade cards for those characters,
Yeah, the
so that
faction
they're all
sets.
for Relic Blade Adventure Battle game, and then you'll also have the Relic Blade Cursebreaker cards. So yeah, that I think that's the main pledge. The core pledge is a 2-player box set that gives you components and rules for using in Cursebreaker and Relic Blade, and then for new players, they'd get the new Seeker's Handbook bundled with it at a discount. So it'd be like you'd get 2 games for the price of one.
I'm liking it.
Um,
I'm super excited to see that
yeah,
in book form. All of those
I
tokens and
know
stuff.
it'll be really fun. I know I've got to get a hold of Connor and Ben and see if they've how things have changed it with their tokens, because they changed their
Oh yeah,
token
the foldy tokens ones, huh?
setup um, for Demonship. That's a different. I
Yep,
don't know if it's
that's
the
a
same supplier, but
yeah,
it's a
yeah.
different
It's
token.
a different style, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe we'll have a hookup for a US based printer. We'll see.
That'd be slick.
hmm hmm Yeah. So that's the Kickstarter news, I guess. Is the other thing is that we have the metal masters of the new figures.
Yep,
They're
I
looking
have
really
them.
good, and you have them. You're ready to paint them. I sent a set to Tabletop Merc,
Oh boy.
uh, Michael Lugo, and he's gonna do some sample painting. I should have ordered a bunch more. Maybe I will. I'd love to send some to like Stephanie
Yeah, no,
or
you're reading my
or
brain.
some other
You're reading my
some
brain
other like
mind.
influencers. Get Jamie on it.
Yeah, exactly. Let's do it.
So
We get to start sending out the relic blades to the peeps. Cause yeah, speaking of,
mhm.
similarly, just this morning and yesterday, my buddy Dr. Rhino was one of the peeps that I sent the combatant to from Pit Lord, and he was showing me his Pit Lord guy, Pit Lord combatant, and he's a cool blue skinned dude. I said, wow, he's blue double D, and then yeah, Orion's Belt Minis hit me up randomly. She also painted a really awesome version of the combatant. And like about a week ago now, she randomly messaged me and said, "Hey, what's your address?" And I was like, it's this. And she's like, "Okay, cool." And I was like, So there's a part of me that's the time of recording that is like, is she gonna send me the companion? Because I can't think of whatever, it just makes sense. And I just am like,
Mm,
oh my gosh, I'm gonna see that in person. Like that's gonna be a trip. I'm excited
yeah,
for the potential of that because yeah, it's really fun to see and also kind of like put that out there in the style because like invite people to paint and even with like Relic Blade, one thing that's great
mhm,
is just seeing all the different like interpretations of
yeah, yeah,
people's different style and stuff. Like for example, really great stuff's been coming up from the community. Shades of Decay has been busting out some really great Relic Blade stuff. Our buddy, am I forgetting his name now? I want to say Mike. Am I blanking?
Mike Mutiny,
Yes.
yeah, over in
Uh,
Germany,
yes.
yeah,
Oh my gosh, his lone
incredible
guard. Yeah,
stuff,
I'll pop
incredible,
up some photos because
yeah,
yeah, it's really cool to just see like sculpt that you're so familiar with and then just see someone's like a brand new really talented painter's like
yeah.
touch to it. You just
And I think part of what's so wonderful is like is that character select screen where you're like on a fight game and you choose your costume.
yeah, you can like shift the
It feels
colors.
like that. It feels like that because
Exactly.
they're like really iconic characters, but then they these colorways,
The
these
color,
different
yeah.
variations just really evoke such a strong sense of like personality in a really recognizable sculpt. Like
Yes.
because I actually this is a little bit maybe it's embarrassing and terrifying, but someone was asking about on the Discord. They're like, "What comes in the two-player box set?
Oh,
Does it
here
include
we go.
cards?" And I read it and I went,
What do you
"What
mean?
kind of a person goes to the website, sees the object, and instead of reading the item description, goes to Discord?"
Yeah.
And I was
Why would
like,
they jump through these hoops?
that sounds crazy. And so I'm going to assume this person's not crazy. And I went to my website. And guys, for almost a year, the main product for Relic Blade has had no product description.
Just
There's
says
no
box.
list of contents. It just says $85, please. And
Yep.
people have bought it, but like I am, it is incalculable the amount of damage that's caused to Metal King Studio. Because like, how many people went and looked at it and went, am I gonna buy something that I don't even know what's in
Like
it?
quite literally, what
And
is
it's like
this?
it's got books, it's got cards, it's got a whole adventure, it's got figures, it's got it's so meticulously designed, so carefully planned. And then this last moment when I redid my website, it didn't the product description didn't get updated and saved properly. And
Yeah.
like so you got to just move forward from where you are,
Hmm.
um, and feel grateful that people bought it even under the insane
Well,
circumstance of not knowing what
big
it
ups to the
was.
Relic Blade community because
Yeah,
everyone answering questions and
I
bringing that
know.
stuff to our attention and helping people make informed decisions about
Yeah,
about buying Relic Blade
because
because
can you imagine going? Well, let's think of an indie game that you've heard of but you haven't played. So we're like, oh, it's the Drowned Earth. I've heard about this. It's an indie game. You go to the website and it says two-player set, and you click on it, and
nothing.
there's nothing. They
Just
just want your money.
just says round
There's
earth.
no way
Yeah,
you're gonna
just
click OK.
yeah.
So I just felt like I felt totally
It
nauseated.
was
I
like one of
just
those really long hallway movie stretch scenes where you're
Yeah,
just like,
exactly.
oh,
Yeah, yeah. The pull zoom where they like
yeah.
change the
You're
focus
just
and the
like, oh
person's about to
my
pass out. Yeah.
god.
Uh, so
Time stretched before you. You're just like,
exactly. So I asked people in the Facebook group. I was like, "Can you guys share some photos of your painted sets? I want to add. We'll just add that to the product description to like really
just
celebrate the
boom
fact
it
that this
bam it.
actually exists." And so
Yeah,
the
it's not a
website now
ruse.
has that. And so it's being able to share, not only Malev's studio paint jobs, but like
Everybody's.
all the different like iterations. It's such a treat. So if you guys are listening and you don't use Facebook or whatever, Or if you do, you can add your photo to that group of your Storms of Coral set, and I'd love to include it on the website with your crediting you as the painter, as just a way to, I don't know, celebrate that Relic Blade actually exists and isn't just a product with no description.
Yeah, you know, and also
So,
that makes me think of, and I think it's worth mentioning too, that on the side, speaking of kind of like a community angle,
uh,
Adepticon next year in March is coming up, and there's
yeah,
been a couple of dedicated testers making a little bit of I guess a little bit of an event packet that we're going to be trying to have a little meetup at Adepticon.
yeah, we'll have a narrative campaign for people to play in. And there's like a learn to play Relic Blade event scheduled for Friday, I think.
Gosh, that's
Which
going to be
obviously like
wonderful.
probably won't apply to people that listen to this podcast, but yeah, I'm always too busy.
Yeah, it's
Um,
going to be tough for
and
us,
so
right?
I might not really get to like play any games, but I'm really looking forward to hanging out. Like that's the main thing. That's the main time I get to like visit with the homies.
Yeah,
So,
no, it's
so
always
yeah, I'd
funny
love to
too
see you
because
guys at Adepticon.
it's always the same people. Well, in a way, like it's just so funny to have like because even I went to ReaperCon in September, and I went down there with Blacksite, and I saw a couple of people that it was like first time seeing them exclusively at a con that I wasn't at with you, and I was like, oh look,
Mhm.
it's so and so. Like I remember,
Yeah,
like here we are again, you know, like it was, and it's just so funny that those lines are crossing all the time
yeah,
in
yeah.
that con
It would
circle.
be really fun to be able to do more cons, but like
Yo, ReaperCon next year, we
it's a it's
really
a
got to look into that one for Relic
it's a
Blade.
huge job like to be doing cons. Like you need to be on the con team
Yeah, it's
for a
almost
company to do it.
it's
Yeah.
it almost feels like it's generally most indie artists' job. Like
Oh,
that's
it
what you
is.
do.
Yeah,
That's the con
absolutely. Yeah.
circuit, right? Even
Yeah.
recently the Morkborg crew, Johan, he went kind of full time freelance, and since then, since his announcement, if I can recall, he's come to America twice to do two different conventions,
Yeah,
and
that's so much work.
yeah, coming from where they're at over there, and I'm just like, but at the same time, reading his tweets, he's
Is it like Stockholm Cartel, the
yeah, yeah.
publisher, or is it a particularly Merkborg?
No, I think it's well, it is Stockholm Cartel, but the table doesn't look like anything but Morkborg.
Yeah, I think I
And
saw it on Instagram, some at
yeah,
PAX
it's
Unplugged, maybe.
exactly,
Yeah.
that was the last one that they did, and there was another
Mm.
one that they did before that I can't recall the exact
Or
name
is it
of.
Exalted Funeral?
Oh
I guess I don't know. They have a lot of different like publisher names
no,
on there.
I want to
I'm not
say
sure
Exalted
which
Funeral
group it is.
is one that comes up that is using the license a lot, but they're not
Are you
the maker.
sure?
I
I'm
want
not
to,
sure.
yeah, I'm not
Guys,
sure, guys. I will check
our
after, but
ignorance is showing.
yeah,
Sorry.
well,
We like it.
we
Yeah.
like it so much. Yeah, it's great. But just
In fact,
that
I
whole,
just ordered a book from them, a dinosaur one.
oh yeah,
There's a dinosaur time traveling dinosaur RPG.
a time
Uh,
traveling dinosaur RPG.
yeah,
That sounds
so
pretty hype.
yeah, Greg Cherry texted me late at night, and he's like, "Have you seen this? I thought of you," and I was like, "I don't want say no more," and I ordered it. No I didn't want to even like. I clicked
Spoil
on
it.
it, and there was like little like photos from the inside of the book. I was like, don't show me. I want to crack it open. But it's like Jack Kirby style drawings of like these like dinosaurs. It's called Cosmosaurs, maybe.
Cosmosaurs.
And
That sounds
it's a
fun.
RPG, yeah, like a story first RPG. Anyways, I don't RPG that much. I'm much
I know,
more
right?
into
Yeah.
toys.
I want to get into it. There's something about, I think it's fun. The fun thing about RPGs, especially kind of like in the topic of game design, I think without like playing designing like Demonship and like Pit Lord now, and designing a couple of things for like Relic Blade and stuff, a lot of that, when I think and look back on the history, there's a lot of stuff that is tied to playing with toys and playing games and things of that nature. But there's a there's a curious thing that like unlocked in my brain when I started reading RPG, like stuff for dungeon masters. The sort of, because there's those sorts of books that are doing nothing but sort of like setting you up with ideas, or encounter things. And my favorite ones that I'm thinking about now as I talk are the Fantasy Flight, now being published by Edge, but previously by Fantasy Flight, the Star Wars RPG system by Fantasy Flight. They had their expansions.
Mm-hmm.
Their expansion books would have like, they would go into the classes, and they would sort of like tell you, it was just such interesting, it was like such an interesting book, because it kind of felt like the book's information was almost like you and I talking here to the listener about like game design for Relic Blade or something. It really, it's like it's presented in such a way where it's talking about the class, and then it goes sort of meta, and it talks about the overall, these are the themes that this class kind of represents, and when you're designing encounters and do this and have this kind of effect happen because it leans into this theme, whereas if you did something like this, it wouldn't really work with this character arc,
So it's really written more like from the more of a game master mechanical, like regarding you as a player rather than in world. Like I think,
as a person reading a book, as
yeah,
opposed to like going in Star Wars, so to speak. And it just reading those was so fascinating, because like there was so many of them, because they went with each class. And then I got used to sort of like the way that the books were formatted, and they would be like equipment based, and then they tell you about like adventures, like then adventures like campaigns, and then they'd talk about encounters, and like all these little touch points of information and stuff. And it's like, I feel like reading those types of books just opened up those like areas in my brain to where I can do the same, like no matter what game I'm playing now. Like I can step out of the game's framework and go like, oh, okay, so if I wanted to change this, like this is how I would do it. I would use this mechanic and apply it in this way, or blah blah blah. And it's like it's a really interesting and like fun way to be engaging with all this stuff.
Absolutely. So we should talk quickly, maybe not super quickly, but we should talk about Pit Lord. There was some Pit Lord news that we went over in the last attempt at recording the same
Attempt at recording. Yeah.
Right. So like it's about design and stuff. And then since then, I've also been trying to help with some accessibility content.
Earlier you mentioned about Cursebreaker being one thing that you're thinking about, is that you want people to be able to play it, like that sort of accessibility to access the rules. And it's one thing that I've learned from Demonship being out, is like that is a really, if anyone's had a negative experience with Demonship, it is ultimately related to precisely that. The information as presented is only really truly accessible to the most select few of diehard like readers and interpreters, because people that need to perhaps favor to learn a different way, maybe because there's just like not other information out there. For example, like I haven't made like a how to play Demonship video, which if I did,
I still need to do like a Relicblade how to play.
Exactly.
The video that's still out there is like me in my kitchen of my apartment when I first came up with Relicblade, like
this ancient
stuff just like
still the black and white cards. And so there's like all of this stuff where with Pit Lord, I really want to, because it's curious thing with game design is like, especially for me with the way that my brain works, is that I am trying to think of, because one thing that is sort of difficult with Pit Lord in contrast to Demonship is I want them to be similar. Like I want them to follow the same kind of, I want them to feel like they're in a series. Like if you play Demonship and you're familiar with Demonship, that no matter what game I'm coming out with in this like micro game series, there's elements of it which you'll be like, ah, yeah, like, because that's how these games are. That's how he designs them. There's this and that, and there's sort of this intrinsic layer that's kind of present in all of them that makes them not necessarily feel similar, but feel like they're adjacent to each other in some
Mhm.
regards. And while doing that, because I feel like the game's designs are not to say they're complicated or not to say that they're simple, but because I have like all of that information in my head, it's like, oh yeah, it's really straightforward. Now let me take 31 pages of nothing but text to explain to you how simple it is. It's so simple, you know.
I
It's
know.
like it is crazy how like that translation of that, and so it's, you know, as we get into editing and stuff, and when it comes to the play testing with Pit Lord versus Demonship, is the Demonship I really designed to have like a big accessibility angle where there was almost like no boundary, essentially, right? And with Pit Lord, I still want something to be really accessible, but just inadvertently, accidentally, with also the things that are inspiring my design. And I'll name those essentially kind of coming down to two things: the X-Wing movement templates, and how that kind of felt cool to like move your ships around, and just like the referencing of a move and deciding that and programming that. And then the other one is a board game called Onitama, which is kind of like a martial arts themed board game, which is it sort of has the look of like a chess checkers game, um, but it uses a set of cards that there's a bunch of pre-programmed moves in, and when you play a game you essentially shuffle and choose five, and you kind of revolve or running around these five particular moves throughout the whole game. And that aspect of like knowing what moves that you have available and where what's going to happen, those two games inspired a lot about Pit Lord's movement, because in Demonship you are, again, go back to the sort of abstraction element. I wanted you to be able to use whatever miniature you wanted, including being able to reskin the game in the core rules, so that like I don't have the action called like pulse rifle or something. This thing's the flame frag is kind of like, you know, obviously a little bit set into a genre with its name, but all of this stuff you should be able to just reskin in any way that you'd like. But in Pit Lord, it is set in a way where it's a game about combat. Like Demonship is a game about movement, and it abstracts a lot of action and
Mhm.
kind of its
Yeah, like
choices.
it's because Demonship is very much a chase
Yeah,
sim.
like
Like you're running away from demons that are pursuing you, and you're running through the objectives, and you don't always escape, but
yes.
you have to keep running and moving. Whereas Pit Lord is a fight between you and the other gladiators. So like you don't just enter the arena and run out the other side of it, you know.
Yep. Yeah.
So
That's a
it's funny because like the mechanics are similar, but also the whole like gameplay loop is totally different.
yeah.
So
As soon as you kind of change that, and I think that that's a curious thing too, because when people were sort of asking about like fantasy version of Demonship, it's like
uh,
that sort of that's just Demonship with
yeah,
different dressing, right?
uh,
Whereas, because it's like the fantasy elements are not necessarily what are being abstracted in the rules, because to your point,
oh yeah. I
it's a
mean, when I
chase, right?
played the first time I played Demonship,
we
I
played it
would
with
use the Relicblade Thief and the
exactly.
Ogsul
The
eyeballs and
dogs, yep, yep,
uh,
exactly. And so it could really be kind of whatever in that sense. And in designing it, I've been excited to see people take that and kind of like run and go down very specific themes with their
yeah,
stuff. But yeah, when you take the game, because I think the biggest change ultimately is the actions, because in Demonship you have 6 actions which you choose, and they have results that program the demons to do specific and different things as well. And it's the same in Pit Lord, but in Pit Lord there is a whole suite of weapons, because it seems kind of like, if the game's about fighting in a, a fighting game, if we think about like Soul Calibur or something like that, where each character has like a unique weapon, there's an element of that. And then just kind of I wanted there to be this feel of having to make like choices and use what you have. Like, you don't get to really choose what weapons that you get, but hopefully you'll like a particular weapon in one way, and you'll like to use it, or you'll know how to use it effectively versus other ones, or yada yada. And so, because it's about the weapons, this whole 6 actions in Demonship doesn't translate over to Pit Lords, because you're not like, the action isn't I swing sword, like, because I wanted there to be these templates that have swing patterns, and I really want it to be almost like, I'm curious as to what people will like say it as, because one of the things that I think is like really fun to as a designer, especially being as kind of like new as I am, when other people have like examples or things that they can pull to be like, Demonship is like this other game, and I've like never played that game. I'm like, I don't even know what this guy's talking about.
mhm.
um so I'll be curious to see if people think like Pit Lord resembles like a mech game or something of that nature, where there's a lot of programming and the movement and like swinging of attack patterns and stuff, because all of the rules and all of the different weapons and enemies and the way that they kind of react and stab to you and are attacking you and stuff, I want it to feel like a very, it's such a, it's so shrunk down, because in like Demonship you do an action that says move up to 3 spaces, but moving up to 3 spaces in Pit Lord is like a big deal. That's a lot of movement, that's a lot to actually move on the board. So now to move 3 spaces is almost like the top tier type of movement, where it's going to be much more common that you are simply moving 1 space at a time, and it's sort of representing the action being down to each step, each swing, each jab, each like slice, and trying to like get down those precise moments, because I do want it to
Mhm.
feel kind of like a duel, but at the same time it has a big action feel, where I want it to have kind of like a Jackie Chan inspired style movie, where, or it's fight scene that has that kind of dynamic, where there's guys on your left and right in front of you, and you can kick a crate at this guy and smash him off the edge, and then
Mhm.
slice this guy and then move and push this dude. And so
Yeah,
having the opportunity to like combo moves and do cinematic moments is at the heart of Pit Lord. But in terms of like resolution and stuff, all of the action, because there's a lot of movement in Demonship, and there's a lot of movement in Pit Lord too. But right now, a lot of the movement comes from involuntary movement, where you're like smacking somebody or pushing models, and that is giving a lot of interesting changes to that kind of programming, because as soon as you start moving models around like out of sequence, then the things that they're going to be doing on their turn start changing and becoming real
yeah,
interesting. So
yeah. I'm really looking forward to it. Yeah, I think it's interesting how the core game mechanics from Demonship are going to be translated into essentially like a completely different genre of gameplay,
Mm-hmm.
but still the small, it's still on the 6x6. It still is using the action economy of like the pulse dice style HP action
Yeah.
um, integrated. So yeah, it's a very cool like challenge you've put before yourself
For real.
to
Yeah.
like really write it. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I've been getting um, excited about it and doing some Pit Lord fan art.
Yes, the all of the stuff that we've been chatting about, because like the big thing about it that is challenging when we kind of talk about like playtesting and stuff, and something that she had early on, which you mentioned was like in crucial, like in integral to the point of like, if you didn't have it, it wouldn't be Cursebreaker, and that is like those cards. Like if you didn't have the spell
Yeah.
books, it just you just, you're not playing Cursebreaker, like it's
No,
it really is.
you'd just be hearing that a game could exist with these
Exactly.
cards.
So, and it's curious how like that's how important it is, and
Mhm.
there's all this sort of talk about. I've heard people chat about the proximity of like closeness in the design space between video games and tabletop games, and doing Pit Lord can definitely makes me see that, because there's like intrinsic like visuals and the way that information is visually represented. And so I guess an example, to use a video game example, where in the Batman Arkham games, there was a mechanic that was pretty popularized for an era of games, which is still pretty prevalent, where it's a sort of if you see a yellow lightning appear above Batman's head, or it could have been blue lightning, that's the time when you press the counter button because someone's attacking you. So
Mm.
anytime you see that thing above his head, you press Y and no damage will occur to you, because Batman will perfectly just counter somebody and just deliver justice. And so there's this visual element where if that wasn't in the game, it would not function the same. Like the way that the
Yeah.
player would have to interact with that mechanic would be so fundamentally different that it would change the whole way that the game felt. You would have to alter the amount of opponents. You'd have to alter the speed of opponents. You'd have to alter the size of the arenas that you fight in. Like it would change everything just from not having a thing appear above his head at the right moment, right? And it's sort of similar with like with Pit Lord, without having these like cards, without having um the 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 dimensions, because like in Demonship is real easy to, again, it's so the stuff is just like walls, like it's just like walls. But now in Pit Lord,
Mhm.
now the walls do stuff, now the walls have
Yeah.
rules.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Mhm.
when it comes to how do we how do you know that, like how do you know that the wall has rules, how do we represent, how do we show that? And it's just like, it's so curious to sort of, I guess, like walk into the design process and be like, yeah, this is just like that. And then because I've made a few decisions being like, whoa, this is like a whole different beast. This whole game, and what I'm requiring it to kind of lean on really is making the design process so different. It's so interesting too. And being really, it's a good teacher, because with Demonship, again, like that was like my first rule book. There's no like illustrations for examples. There's written examples, but I think
Yeah.
even a couple of the written examples confuse people. So there's like parts about having on that information only be represented in words, is like, oh, okay, I need to. That's almost like where part of this, like, we'll have information represented on cards and stuff like that. Because if like Demonship did come with cards, and it had like each enemy thing had their own cards and all
Mhm.
this stuff. So it's like, that's what I did with Pit Lord. All the enemies have their own cards, and instead of like having to flip through a section of the book or something like that, you you just look at the card. Oh, okay, he does this,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
that is
And
it.
like particularly with Demonship, the board state is an active action puzzle that you have to choose. Like I only played a little bit of it, but there's this game called John Wick Hex, and it's a turn-based John Wick game where
Mm-hmm.
you like
I've
choose
seen
your
that one, yeah.
actions, and then when you hit play, or when you after you like choose what actions you're gonna do, he quickly goes and does his like
Just John Wick
John Wick
stuff.
stuff.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and so that sort of like comes to mind with Demonship, where really it's a puzzle, so you have to think about it as a human, but it could take a while, and you're like, all right, if I step backwards one, then I'll burn two move actions for the demons, and I'll only proc them to move. So then I'll be safe for that. And then if I style on them, then you're kind of like doing these like little calculations of trying to predict what the demons will do to
Mm-hmm.
chase you. And so you have to know whether you're gonna, you know,
Do that
just
thing.
sprint for the door, or if you're gonna like do a fun jump and roll over some terrain to try and make sure that they have to move, and then they have to attack from a certain angle and they can't get to you. So because it's more of a puzzle, you gotta like have all of the information in front of you. Because
Yeah.
if you don't have the information of like what they'll do, you're missing a major part of how to make the right choice
Mm-hmm.
in the puzzle. So in that same way, like components about your enemies, components that'll show like your whether or not your enemies have evade tokens, or how all of that's going to interact. Just making sure you have it laid out in front of you, and all that information visible is sort of part of being able to see the puzzle and see the game that you're actually playing. Because it's easy to look at a game like Elden Ring and say, I am guy with sword in a dungeon,
Mm-hmm.
and a harpy is coming to go and bite my face. And so you think, oh, the game I'm playing is like sword and sorcery action game, right? But if you've played these Souls-like games, or not Souls-like, but actual like Soulsborne from software games, you know that the game isn't a hack and slash. It's a methodical watching what your opponent is doing, even though it's happening in real time and you have to act fast and use reaction for it. You're really like one step to the left is actually,
Uh,
you don't have to dodge. You just, if you move that
Literally
way,
like a
they'll miss.
hitbox or yeah, swing
Yeah, and
hitbox
the
or something.
hitboxes are so precise that you could move in such a way that the sword just misses you by a hair.
Mm-hmm.
And so a skilled player will know, like, oh, the harpy's coming. I step to the left, and then I charge up a strong attack to her back, and then that'll stun her, and then I can do this. So in that same way, like if you're just looking at Demonship or Pit Lord, you think, oh, it's a gladiator game. I'll mash attack button, or I'm being chased by demons. I'll just run or shoot at them. There are demons in the room, so I'll shoot. You can end up just like killing yourself because you didn't know the puzzle.
Yeah.
Like you didn't know how to be doing it. So I think it's a very exciting gameplay experience, and that part of explaining to people that you got to be clever, you got to be Jackie Chan in the fight scene. You can't just be a heavyweight boxer boxing.
Yeah, guy. That's
Yeah.
interesting. That makes me think about that too. Because compared to, I guess we'll say like traditional miniature war games, like tabletop
Uh,
skirmish games, where you're mostly playing against an opponent,
yeah.
the how you learn the game is kind of that process can be different depending on your opponents and lots of different things. But what you're mentioning there makes me think about like that curious video game logic of learning where did you see the movie with Tom Cruise? Was it, well, now what was it? Because they had like three titles something.
Mm.
I have to look it up right now because
Is it the one where he's a time
it's a
traveling
time
power
he
armor guy?
yes, he keeps redoing his time
Yeah,
loop
yeah. I forget what it was called,
because it's like
but it was cool.
it's got three titles. Edge of Tomorrow, some, yeah, that's Edge of Tomorrow, they'll call that's one.
Okay.
um in that that movie was inspired, if I remember, just reading my random articles here and that it was inspired by a short story that I think was written by a Japanese author that was inspired essentially by video games. By he was looking at, if I remember the story correctly, the author of the book was watching Metal Gear Solid and noticed the way that as a what makes a video game learning loop interesting is that death is an intrinsic part about that, where
Yeah, it's like how you learn.
it's the thing that teaches you. And there was a big period of time where that kind of wasn't really the case, and then the sort of Soulsborns really brought that back, where, oh, I learned from my mistakes. Like that's the actual kind of big part about this, as opposed
Yeah.
to creating a game experience that teaches me in such a way that I avoid mistakes, and that's how I'm good at the game. That I learn is you really get like a true mastery, because
Mhm.
I have if you're familiar with Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, there was a lot of cool mechanics in that game, mostly like the camouflage mechanic. But I remember watching like some like speed runner YouTube, like kind of like a, and this person knew not only like it seemed like every mechanic that was like present with the movement of their character, but like the timing of the patrols of the enemies, the item usage, like they were like human computering Metal Gear Solid and doing stuff that would be unthinkable if you were to just look at the game and say like, oh, I'm a soldier guy and I gotta sneak past the
Yeah, yeah.
guards. Like the dude was doing the most insane things to just break the game's like logic, and where it was
Mhm.
blowing my brains out. And it's sort of curious to look at Demon Ship and look at Pit Lord and then compare them to say something like getting better at Warhammer 40,000.
Yeah.
How that looks in comparison to getting good at playing Demon
Right. Yeah,
Ship.
because it's similar, like like to bring back to like Jackie Chan. A Jackie Chan fight scene is like this perfectly choreographed, using the environment, using this wacky
Mm-hmm.
stuff, and you get this really like fun cinematic, like adventure fight scene,
Yeah.
right? Whereas if you watch a real fight scene, like say MMA,
Yeah.
that's not, no one is doing those things because it's so quick and so brutal, and there's no like planning a fun, funny thing.
Yeah. The
You
story
know, I
this
mean,
the
sometimes they do funny
story.
things, but like, they go to ground and then they're like really
Yep,
choking
it's
each other and
it
sweating.
the
But
dynamic of it changes.
like part of the fun is getting to be that clever, right? And so like getting to have that moment of like getting that perfect activation where you just really style on the demons and you just,
Yeah.
that's the moment that is like really exciting and fun and really in the genre of what the type of miniature game that you're writing and I'm writing with Relic Blade, where you're like being clever and doing something fun, and especially with Cursebreaker, planning ahead and like laying funny traps and like
Mm-hmm.
nailing people with like these really clever puzzle things. But the problem is like seeing Jackie Chan do it, like do a roll over a saw blade, and then like
Yeah.
grab throw a hammer at a guy and then kick a guy out a window, like that all happens in real time. But if you have to sit there and think, hang on, all right, if I use a dodge roll past this saw blade, I won't take damage from it, and then when he comes to me, he's going to get nailed by it, and then I can do the, it doesn't have the same snappiness, but you get the reward of your plan working, right?
Yeah.
And whereas like other games that don't have that like layer of puzzleness, that I think the two games that we're working on right now, me, Cursebreaker, and you, Pitlord, that puzzle game, like solo, sort of, not necessarily solo in the case of, but where there's like this game machine that you're like really gamifying and turning into a cinematic play of what happens,
Mm-hmm.
is different from other skirmish games that like you read the rule set and it's really like, here's how you attack, here's how you resolve damage, there, we're done, we wrote a miniature game. It's
Yeah.
like that doesn't that it's true that in a head-to-head game all you need is the ability to move and to fight,
Mm-hmm.
and you have a whole game. And I don't know, I think that's appropriate if there's layers of excitement and discovery,
Yeah, right.
and if
There's
the
always
hobby
going to
is
be
part of it,
other aspects to
but
it.
there's this like funny balance of like not being, yeah, there's this funny balance where you've got this like clever puzzle that's unfolding, and then if once it clicks in your mind how it works, you can really turn the dial up on just how clever you are and get that delight of being tactical and quick on your feet, and having a plan work out in an exciting way. That's different from like rolling to see if you hit,
Yeah.
and then rolling to see how much damage you did, and then finding the combat resolution of your Space Marine last cannons
Well,
taking out a certain target, and then like trading pieces. It's not really like that. It's a totally different
curious.
miniatures experience, right?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I think going back to what I was saying about the Batman with the like the alert that you need to counter and like how intrinsic that is, what as you say all that, and I'm circling back to it, what I sort of land on about both of these systems that we're talking about, because Cursebreaker and Pit Lord, with Batman's counter ability, like not only is that mechanically interesting and fun, but it serves a massively important thing in that game, is that when you do it, even because the way that they've done the animations in it are really, really good. If people throw a left punch or a right punch or a kick or any sort of specific attack, Batman has very specific counter animations for it. And when you do it in the game and you're performing and you are quite literally untouchable, it feels like you are Batman. That's what comes through, is that you feel like
Mm-hmm.
Batman. And so in Cursebreaker, when you pull that stuff off, you feel kind of like you did a cool wizard thing,
Yeah, you
you
feel like
know?
a wizard. You feel like
Yeah.
you played the like
And
intelligence.
when
You used
you
intelligence instead of strength to achieve something. And
exactly. And when you
yeah,
are in Pit Lord, you're moving around and navigating and battling, it has that element that it makes you feel like a competent fighter. And I
yeah,
think that's kind of one of the to hone in, that there's a big feel where in traditional, if like traditional being the type of miniature war game that's existed for about 30 plus years, those game systems are not designed to make you feel like the soldiers on the ground or feel like the characters in that same way. That the experience that they abstract and try to lend to the player, and we talk about the puzzle, because our puzzles that we're
mhm,
putting in our games are intrinsically themed to make you feel and immerse you into the genre of the game. Whereas if I were to look at like 40K and my experience playing that, I what when I'm playing a 40K game that is exciting me, I feel like I'm watching a cool movie. Like
yeah,
that.
yeah,
That's
absolutely.
what my favorite 40K games look like. Is that I be after I've done all the dice rolling, I can see that scene, but
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not. I don't necessarily have a part of it. I might feel like the director, perhaps,
yeah. Or I
but
mean, hopefully, you feel like the commander
yeah, there's a little
your
bit of
plan is
that for
working,
sure. But
but at the same time,
I've
you
always
don't
felt
feel
like
like you are the
watching.
guy. Yeah,
Yeah, you
you
don't
don't
feel
feel
like
like
the
you are the guy swinging the sword or chainsword.
hmm and thinking
You're
about
seeing
like
your troops go and achieve their objectives.
yeah, there's an element of like this kind of curiously watching the resolution and being able to like look back at the game and be like, wow, all of these different things occurred. And yeah, that's
Mhm.
it's a lot of fun, but it's also a
Yeah,
crazy challenge at the same time. And so we've been chatting for about an hour in a couple of minutes plus on. It's
yeah. It's good.
been good.
That seems like a good time. I mean,
It's
I
been
had a lot
good.
of fun. I hope you guys enjoyed hanging
Yeah,
out with us.
cheers,
We
y'all.
got a cool new Relic Blade Kickstarter coming. We got Pit Lord in
Right around the
development. We
corner.
got all
Both of them.
kinds of good stuff we're working on. And we love you guys. Merry Christmas. Happy birthday.
Yeah. All right, y'all. Big love and peace. We'll see y'all next time.